Okay, so there's a lot of Brexit fever heating up, and justifiably so. You see, for the past almost, yeah, it's almost getting up to 2 years. It's going to be 2 years come next Monday. No, it will be this Friday. Come this Friday, it's going to be, or this Saturday, is going to be 2 years to the day that Britain voted to leave the European Union. They still haven't done it. But don't worry, because the European Union is basically doing the best it can to just disintegrate. And no better case can be brought than Angela Merkel, who is pretty much the symbol now of recalcitrant Europe, the type that wants to continue to accept migrants, to engage in, uh, just crazy social spending, the type of person who basically, I'll tell you what the problem is. Germany has been governed since the 70s, apart from about 8 years of the Gerhard Schroeder government by the CDU CSU government. The CDU is a Christian Democratic Union, and the CSU is the Christian Social Union. So they're almost the same party, except that the CSU is active in Bavaria, and in the rest of the country it's the CDU. So it's a pretty simple format over there. Who is the other main party in Germany? The SPD, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, Sozialdemokratische Partei of Deutschland. That's what they're called. So the SPD has basically been neutered. The majority of Germans have never. Look, there's a number of parties in the German parliament. Let's start from that. So, 1 second. Yeah, find the Bundestag. So you can see here. This is the electoral map of Germany, or really, actually, it's just the chamber map. You see on the right, this is the alternative for Germany. Then you have this is the dark blue, that's the CSU, the black, the CDU, that's the FDP in yellow. They're kind of a liberal pro-business party. You have the Greens, then you have the red, which is the SPD, and then you have Die Linke, which is the left. They're literally called the left. And the Die Linke is the former Communist Party of East Germany. But the fact of the matter is that they only have 69 seats. The Greens have 67 seats. So you have a left wing coalition potentially of let me see here. That'll be 222 plus, yeah, that would be 289 seats out of 709. So essentially, there's really a problem in the German parliament of really skewing to the right and the center right. Okay, the center right would definitely be the CDU, and then you would talk about the Free Democrats are definitely, if you look at them philosophically, they don't really line up with the left, except for on social issues. So where does this come into play with Europe? Well, the truth of the matter is that even though Merkel herself and the upper rungs of the CDU are considered, pro-immigration, they also the rank and file of the party are not. A lot of the people in the rank and file of the party would probably rather Germany close its doors, just like a lot of these other countries in Europe are. You see countries like Hungary, now Slovenia, which was never really an anti-immigration country. Pretty soon you're going to see a lot of these other smaller nations of Europe increasingly go towards the anti-immigration portion. By the way, later this summer, I hate to break it to these progressive people that They think of Scandinavia as being the paradise for all people, and the way a society should run. It's looking more and more likely that the Swedish Democrats, which are contrary to the way we think of Democrats, that party, the Swedish Democrats, are probably going to seize control of their parliament, and that's going to cause or if they don't reach a majority, they're going to really upset the order over there, and probably they'll make it so it's necessary to have them in a coalition. Otherwise, you'll have to see basically every other party get together to block them. That's the way it sometimes works. So essentially, you're seeing an increase in anti-immigration sentiment in Europe, and this is, I think a lot of these immigrants they do come from countries such as in sub-Saharan Africa, Burkina Faso, that have never really been um, very stable. So you could talk about people from those countries or from Algeria, which is a hole, and people get murdered there literally for nothing. Over which the people get murdered in Algeria over which fanatical Islamic group you belong to. So if you belong to the wrong one, they'll basically massacre you and your entire village, and that's what they used to do back in the 90s, and they've kept doing it. And really, it shows kind of a society that's degenerated into nothing. And the reason I mention Algeria is because if you want to make the claim that the West is responsible for all this Islamic bloodshed, then then you haven't read about Algeria. After the French left in the 60s, it was good for about 25 years under a secular, quasi-socialist government, and then it degenerated into chaos because of the downfall of the socialist model. They couldn't keep it going. It was extremely corrupt over there under Chadli Ben Jadid, if you want to read about him. Unfortunately, I mean, and I think he tried his best. Let's see if I think he might still be alive. No, he's dead. Too bad for him. Anyway, unfortunately for a lot of those people, they're going into Europe. They're hoping to reach a better life. A lot of them are hardcore Muslims who can't let go of the fact that that's part of the reason that their own country has never prospered, because they have a religion that's incapable of separating its dogmatic beliefs from the needs of everyday life. It would happen with a lot of other religions. I'd probably say Buddhism is one of those religions where it doesn't necessarily impede progress, or just regular regular everyday life. Buddhism lets people go. So what does it have to do with Europe? Well, for 2 years, like I said, Britain has been trying to avoid taking the plunge that it was supposed to do when its voters democratically decided to leave the EU. Well, now the government is not going to have a choice pretty soon, because you can see here, Angela Merkel's coalition partners threatened to start turning migrants away at the border from today, as the German chancellor faces being toppled within days amid the deepening crisis. Angela Merkel is facing Destiny Day in a bitter row over immigration that could see her 13-year rule of Germany come to an abrupt end. The chancellor's coalition partners, the Christian Social Union, want to turn away at the border immigrants who have previously been registered in another EU country, often their first port of call, Italy or Greece. But Merkel is firmly opposed to the plan, favored by CSU Interior Minister Horst Seehofer, warning that would leave countries at the EU's geographic southern periphery alone to deal with the refugee influx. Well, I guess I'll just have to deport people. An act of rebellion from Seehofer could force her to sack him, which would be the end of the government and the alliance between CDU and CSU. An unnamed CDU source told Bild. Bild is one of the more powerful daily newspapers in Germany. The German newspaper called it Destiny Day for Angela Merkel. It comes after a CSU MP suggested Merkel could be ousted by next week if she doesn't come up with a plan for the migrant crisis. Kai Whittaker, a member of Miss Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, said infighting could weaken the ruling coalition and make her position untenable. He said Germany could have a new situation by the end of next week, later clarifying that he meant probably a new chancellor. Merkel is desperate to find a common European solution to the migrant crisis at the June 28th through 29th European Union summit. Seehofer has been one of the fiercest critics of Merkel's liberal stance that allowed 1 million asylum seekers into Germany since 2015. His CSU party is due to meet today, Monday, to decide which course to take. He has the nuclear option of seeking approval to shut Germany's borders immediately in defiance of Merkel, or the less aggressive choice of giving her an ultimatum of 2 weeks to sort out a deal with other EU nations. Signaling that he is leaning toward the latter option, Seehofer wrote in a column in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung that it is essential that the EU summit takes a decision at the end of June. The situation is serious but still solvable, he wrote. Whichever option he chooses, the ball will land in Merkel's court. If Merkel is given a 2-week ultimatum, she would still have the Herculean challenge of persuading EU governments to sign up to a common plan on the migrants. Central and Eastern EU nations such as Hungary and Poland have either refused outright or resisted taking in refugees under an EU quota system that has essentially floundered. A populist far-right government in place in Italy, as well as the conservative far-right in power in neighboring Austria, have also taken an uncompromising stance on immigration. EU states are deeply divided on how to deal with large numbers of people fleeing conflict, especially from the Middle East. The row boiled over this week when a boat carrying Libyan migrants rescued at sea was refused permission to dock on either Italy or Malta. So you can actually see it, I think. I think these, well, I don't know if these are the refugees or not. Now, this goes on. And it actually has this Kai Whittaker guy. It looks like he's doing well for himself. Oh no, that's his sister. Spoke too soon. Kai Whittaker, what's the deal with this guy? Yeah, so this is a guy who he's a little more on the liberal wing socially, because Angela Merkel, if you don't know, so those people who want to, and I'm not speaking to specifically progressives, but there are people who are like liberals who claim that Angela Merkel is like the leader of the free world now that Donald Trump is, Trump is Hitler or whatever. Well, Angela Merkel has voted very recently against same-sex marriage in Germany, making her. I mean, how do progressives and liberals support somebody like that? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, I've always said, I think marriage is a joke. I think same-sex marriage is a joke. I think people who supported it are idiots. They've basically they've defanged the entire institution of any precarious meaning it had anyway. Essentially since the 70s, the institution of marriage has become basically a financial tax shelter. That's really what people. That most of these people, there's a number of priorities for why they want to get married. Immigration. Then B, in order to fit in with the rest of society. C, it's a better tax setup than just being together. And then D, there's a lot of people who they marry a spouse in order to get their money. And I'll say that there are men who do that too. There's men who marry certain women because she's loaded, her dad's loaded, or her family's loaded, or she might be very successful. It happens. Don't pretend it doesn't. Things like that happen. And I don't know how we got into that tangent, but the bottom line here is that you have Germany is the EU essentially. Without it, there is no economic engine. Now, what are the other states that are loyal EU members as of right now? You talk about the Netherlands, Belgium, um, France, Spain, Luxembourg, of course, which doesn't matter. Talk about I'd say Sweden, not Switzerland, of course. Those are the states that are the most pro EU European Union states, and they're gradually getting encroached upon by extremely anti EU states. So up until about a year ago, I believe Austria was fairly moderate as with regards to EU integration. Now it has an explicitly anti-immigration leader whose name escapes me. And then you have the Italians under Giuseppe Conte. They will, I believe, be the next country to start talking about leaving the EU. Who's another country that's pro-EU? Ireland. They have virtually no strategic strength. They're basically isolated over there on the western, in the middle of the Atlantic, almost. They're dependent more on the British than they are on the rest of Europe. It's not going to work. So you see, in reality, the united Europe that the EU wanted to create has failed to materialize. It's basically disintegrating before our very eyes. And if you look at the German Parliament, I'll explain to you why it's kind of important the way it's happening. Okay, so you look at so what's the coalition? The coalition is right now the CDU and CSU. So these two groups over here, you can't really see. This might help a bit. Nope. So you see the black and the darker blue here, which you can hardly see, but it's along this axis. So these two and that red spot, that makes up the coalition. So you have a coalition of 399 parties facing an opposition of 310. Now, without the CSU, the Christian Social Union, they still technically have the government. It would fall down to 300. Well, actually, no, they would lose their government. It would fall down to 344, and then the opposition would have 356. And the other issue with that, why is it so important that Merkel keep the CSU? Well, the CSU and CDU have always been together. It's almost the same party, apart from the fact that one is in Bavaria, the other is in the rest of Germany. So essentially, the symbolism of this is very important. It means that Angela Merkel has become so pathetically inept and incompetent that a central component of her movement, of the broader movement of moderate Christian conservative Germany, which is also in Germany it still means like tremendous social welfare programs. Okay, so that's the way they think. I mean, it's up to them. I don't care. Good for. I have friends from Germany. I like the Germans, despite what people may think. I think Germans are they're pretty nice people. They don't have the nicest past, but the people who are around now. What am I supposed to say? Screw you. So in any case, these Germans, they've come to be used to this CSU CDU coalition. These two parties that work together on the federal level. One of them in Bavaria, one of them in the rest of the country, and they've been unstoppable. In fact, they've almost never lost control of the Bavarian government. Well, now if you lose that, it means that basically she has run the party so poorly that it's literally coming apart, and it's becoming more and more isolated. And the rank and file within the Christian Democratic Union, the federal party, are going to start saying, well, is this party all about keeping Merkel in power in order to preserve the EU, or is it in order to serve the needs of the constituents? Now, I think they'll choose the latter. And then when that starts to happen, when you start to see, a lot of these people either force her party back into a more reasonable position, or these voters start flowing to a different party, the Alternative for Germany, and that could happen if a new election is forced, then that could lead to a real earthquake in German politics. Imagine seeing that the second largest group in parliament isn't the Social Democratic Party, which is a mildly, it's a social democratic socialist party. It's actually a party that's full on anti-immigration, possibly more libertarian. The Alternative for Germany, which I've done a little research on them. They're not fascistic as people call them. So we'll see what happens. But I see this as just another piece of the EU falling apart. And pretty soon, the British are dragging their feet on Brexit. Soon there's going to be nothing to leave. The EU will fall apart. It's trade treat. Once the institutions of the union begin to erode, and there's actual, some of these countries simply begin to say, well, we're not even going to follow EU procedure. Then having a trade deal won't even matter with the EU. It will be basically like having a trade deal with a defunct business. It's just not going to exist. That's about it. Please like and share the video and subscribe. Comment below, and I'll talk to you later. Have a great Monday.